Let's see about 89. Well, I just finished watching season 5 of Lost, and it's probably the best season since the first season. The first season was great because it opened the first mystery box, and you really didn't know what was happening, and you could kind of believe that there was a mystery to solve and all the pieces were there. This season, they actually seem to make an attempt to actually explain all of this. Now, time travel is used a lot in this season, and that was mostly not because they're interested in time travel, but because it was a means to actually put themselves all in different times and places so they could actually show a lot that had happened on the island and explain everything. So they're using it as a device to actually resolve a lot of the story. And I'm wondering if this is the 5th season of 6. I'm wondering if they knew they were going to have a 6 or not. And maybe they were writing this as the last season to answer everything. Because I kind of feel like, in a way, they answered pretty much everything or enough, and when you get to the end of the season, it almost could have ended there. Okay, so the best part is that Jin is found alive. He shows up, washes up with the French lady when she first arrives on the island. So this is, I think, around 1974. He ends up being found by the Dharma people, and he ends up joining Dharma. And basically, everyone who was on the island is taken with the island, and the people are taken, not the things. So there's a moment early on where you see all the survivors and the camp's disappeared, and they're confused about the camp being disappeared, and it's like, well, no, it hasn't been built yet because we're in a different time than we were before. We've all been moved. Then Sawyer and Juliet get separated, and Jin was already separated because he was in the water. So there does seem to be a displacement where people have come in at different times. But eventually they all seem to sync, and there is time is sort of skipping, and you get these flashes of light, and people shift, and it's affecting some people more than others, and it has a physical strain on them all. But eventually they all end up pretty much synced to the same time, and then Locke does actually resolve it. He just turns a big wheel, I think, and gets everything back in sync. I think that's what happened. I've actually forgotten. But everything goes sort of back to normal. The headaches stop and everything, and they end up stuck in, I think, 1974. I think Jin landed before then, but that's where they end up. I'm not sure if they're moving in a line or if they're moving backwards and forwards now I think about it. It's a bit confusing now I actually think back to it. But yeah, they end up joining the Dharma Initiative. They end up, I can't remember how they managed to do it, but they end up joining the Dharma Initiative and being there pretty much from the start. And later on, the sort of issue is with Jack and Kate and Syed and the Oceanic Six, Harley and Ben and all that. They caught it and Locke. They sort of come together with the conclusion or the belief that they have to return to the island. They shouldn't have left the island, and the only way to do it is sort of to put themselves in the same situation again, where they're traveling over the same airspace in a plane together. So they try to arrange this, but of course Syed doesn't want to do it, Kate doesn't want to do it. But eventually they either change their mind or things convoluted where they end up all on a plane together. Hurley buys out a whole plane, there's only a couple other people on it. Sun is there because she is told that Jin is still alive. Now they get on the plane and there's a flash, and Jack and Kate and Syed and is that it? They disappear. Whereas Ben and Sun are left on the plane, which crashes with the pilots, and they survive. And there's another group of people that show up, and we are moving around different times again. So they've crashed in a different time from the time that the ones who disappeared landed in versus the time that the ones were on when the island was shifting. So we've got like at least 3 timelines going at the same time. And it's interesting to see the Dharma stuff, to go back to the 70s to see how that operated and to see them slipped into that, because basically they show up in the ones who disappeared from the plane show up in 1977, and they're found by Jin and Sawyer, who have made lives for themselves in Dahmaville, and they eventually get them in as recruits, except for Saeed, who somehow was separated from the others, and he gets taken as an other. They have sort of like a truce with the others, the original others, and eventually they sort of get stuck into that whole issue, and Syed shoots Ben and escapes, but he doesn't kill him. And the whole issue of, did Syed create Ben? Because Ben was sort of traumatized by his father and trying to get away. He was trying to use the others to get away. He had spoken to them and that. But because of him shooting him and the doctor not wanting to actually operate on him, and the other doctor, I've forgotten all the names all of a sudden. Juliet ended up operating on him and not really being able to really save him, and having to take him and Kate and everyone have to take him off to the others. So did Syed shooting him and giving him over to the others create him and change him? Or, because Kate and Juliet were determined to save him because, he wasn't Ben yet, whereas Syed and Jack, God, I can't believe I forgot his name, Jack, actually were happy to let him die because they believed if they could kill him, it would change the future. So, so we see what happened with the French woman. We see that she went crazy and killed everyone, but Jun survived. I keep calling him Jun because I have a friend called Jun. So we see her story. We see Dharma's story. We see Ben's story. We see, at the start of the season, we see Jacob, who was on the island with another person who they'd obviously been doing this for a while, and they knew that people would keep coming, there'd be a loop, and they engraved and did things in the temple, because now there's temples on the island, and the smoke monster has like hologlyphs and things, and seems to have been worshipped once. And there's a point where Ben goes into this temple and the smoke monster swirls around him, and it's like it's judging him, and because he survived, he feels like he actually isn't evil, and there's a lot of things happening in this season. Jacob keeps showing up all over the place. He goes to Jin and Sun's wedding. He sees Hurley after he's released from the jail. We see him at Sawyer's parents' funeral. We see him paying for something Kate was trying to steal. He's everywhere and he's touching everyone, and he ends up at the end of the season, I may as well just get to that, he ends up being killed by Locke and Ben, who are trying to sort of rule the island, and it's very convoluted and doesn't really get resolved. We see Sun trying to find Jin, and the whole group of them were going to find Jacob. And only, there's all these, rules, of course, from Ricardo, whatever his name is, who is convinced that they are from different times because they've had all these different encounters and that. And they actually, Locke goes in, and we find out when this other group I was talking about before who showed up, they actually have Locke's body. So he was on the plane and dead. So, because he comes back alive, but it's not really him. He's apparently possessed by the other guy who was there with Jacob. And then he's like, yep, I found a loophole. I changed the rules, and basically he kills him. And we don't really understand any of that. So not everything is explained. But when we get to the island, we see how it was formed. We have it explained by the time travel lady, who is Desmond's mother, not Desmond's mother, the mother of the other guy who is helping Desmond, who was doing all the theoretical science stuff. She basically explains that there are all these different pockets of this electromagnetic power around the planet, and they found one on the island. They found the island, which was moving, by working out where it would have been, because they couldn't work out where it was, but they could work out where it was going to theoretically be. And they have this room with this giant pendulum, and I felt like they explained a lot, but now as I'm trying to explain it, I'm realizing how little they did actually explain. But basically it comes down to the team theorized that if they destroy this electromagnetic power, because they're drilling for it and they're about to release it, and that's when they have to build like the cap over it, and then have the button being pushed every whatever hour, whatever minutes, to stop it from going off, basically. And then when Desmond and that don't push it, it goes off, and the first time, that's when they actually crash the plane, and apparently they believe that creates a cycle of events. So they theorize that there's this bomb on the planet, on the island. If they can drop the bomb down the well they're drilling into, basically, they should be able to stop it, destroy it, change everything, stop things from happening, change the sequence of events. And initially they're resisting it. There's a standoff between like half of the survivors and the other half, but eventually they all end up on the same team fighting Dharma together, and they drop the bomb. Unfortunately, it actually doesn't go off when it lands. It's supposed to go off on impact when it's dropped, but once the electromagnetic things start happening and they start dragging all the metallic things towards this hole in the ground, Juliet gets sucked down, she falls, and Sawyer tries to save her, but she basically saves him because the whole thing's going to collapse if he doesn't give up. And she ends up down the bottom, still alive, and she sees the bomb, and she basically hits it with a rock until it explodes. And that's the end of the season. And I think like that could have been the end of the season. They could have just had shown one scene after that where everything's returned to normal and they're basically arriving at LAX from Sydney. And that's the sort of theory that they have, that if they can stop this, then none of that will happen, and they'll go on about their business, and they won't sort of change anything in history and that. But we don't know if that happens or not, because the season ends without any of that. So I don't know, it was an interesting season. It was nice to see Jin talking. It was interesting to see them in the 70s. We got a lot of exploration of what happened with Dharma, and they did try to explain a lot. There's still a few mystery boxes left open, a few interesting things left to resolve. So kind of looking forward to the next season, but I feel like it's going to be like the 5th season of Babylon 5, where they had a 5-year story and they wound it up at the end of the 4th year because they thought they were being cancelled, and then they just had this extra year, they just did other things, and it kind of works but doesn't. So I'm wondering if this season's going to be very much a standalone season, because they resolved a lot of the issues, but they left enough open, obviously, knowing towards the end of the season they must have had another season. So I think a big part of it was trying to end everything off, and then the rest was like trying to prolong it and only answer so much. But yeah, I'm going to go watch season 6, see how it ends. I'm starting to suspect, though, that I actually don't know the ending, because I've been watching this very cynically, because when I first started watching it, I believed that it was a mystery that could be solved, and then I started to realise they were writing it and making it up as they went along, and there weren't any clues at the beginning that would resolve the end for you. So I think that was a bit unfair on the audience. So I've been watching it a bit cynically and also watching it believing I know how it ends, but I'm starting to doubt that the article headline that apparently seemed to give away the ending of the series maybe didn't. So maybe it's going to be different, unless they just throw that out as like a shock ending, which wouldn't make sense, which is why it isn't really making sense of everything that's happening now. But I won't know till I watch it. I'm going to go. Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think. Sorry I couldn't explain that season as well as I thought I could, but it is still very convoluted, and there's a lot of detail and actually a lot harder to explain. And I'm not sure I've even worked out as much of it as I thought. I feel like a lot of it was resolved, and now I'm feeling like, no, there's still a lot more for the next season.